perfect data doesn't exist in any organization. You do create as many pockets of data as you can consolidate to start solving for the next higher order problems, and then keep incrementally working on improving your data in your organization. Eventually you'll get to a shape where you'll feel like 70-80% of the data is okay. The remaining 20%, however hard you try, you're probably going to still have a struggle. The juice might not be worth the squeeze.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Sunder. Sunder, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Tom. Yes, absolutely. It'll be my pleasure. Hi, this is Sunder Balakrishnan here. I love thinking and building in supply chain and building towards sustainable supply chains. I head the supply chain analytics practice at this public listed company called LatentView Analytics. We sleep, breathe, eat data, and that's sort of what we do. And in that, I specialize in supply chain. I have the benefit of working across four different industry verticals: consumer packaged goods, retail, industrial automotive, and technology, all of them rife with use cases for sustainability. So, very excited to be here, Tom. Thank you so much for the welcome.
Thank you, Sunder. And so tell me a little bit more about Latent View and those particular industry verticals you mentioned. What kind of problems are you solving for your clients in those verticals?
Fantastic. Latent View as an organization came into being in 2006 through the vision of two of our founders who worked in the industry for a while, but then figured that in the early parts of the 2000s, analytics was really starting to bloom in multiple industries. They saw their opportunity, they got in, and we got off the ground. 2009, we landed in the US, which now is one of our biggest markets, and
Mhm.
some of the big tech clients are some of our biggest clients. As I said, we operate across five different industry verticals, four of which I operate in: consumer packaged goods, retail, industrial automotive, technology, which is one of our biggest verticals, and financial services. That's the
Right.
fifth industry verticals. If you wanted to sort of get a sense for the cross section of the problems that we look to solve, right from anything to do with customer journeys and understanding customer journeys with data, to campaign effectiveness, of your marketing effectiveness, if you will, to personalization, all in the customer and marketing sphere, to in the supply chain sphere, a lot around manufacturing excellence, logistics, delivery efficiency, on shelf availability, a favorite theme of mine. And then,
Mm.
of course, the underlying theme around that being sustainability, to also working on data analytic problems within financial services or FP&A, HR analytics, and so on across these industry verticals are just the cross section of services and solutions that we built over time.
Okay. And your own journey to where you are today, how did you get to where you are today?
I started out straight out of engineering in software services, spent time writing code. Then I went on to do my management education in general management with a whole mix of subjects that helped me build up a lot of the baseline, if you will.
Mhm.
I then had the opportunity to work on the floor in retail, sort of pick boxes, put it on shelves, sell the product, inward product that is coming in from the suppliers, and so on. And then I got a break in consulting with Infosys, spent
Right.
5 years over there. A lot of data driven operations consulting. Then followed it up with PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, again, the similar theme of data driven operations. I then had an opportunity to work for a boutique analytics company before I then got the big break at LatentView. And with LatentView, I had the opportunity to actually set up the whole supply chain practice, the thinking around what is it that we are even going to offer in the market. One of the themes we talk about is this connected supply chain. The
Mm.
argument being that a lot of tech in supply chain means that supply chains are integrated, but the fact that a ship turns sideways in the Suez Canal and it causes a supply issue in Mexico, this can only and only be built through the association data points give you, and that is the essence of a connected supply chain. That's what we are building and thinking every day and consulting our customers as well.
Okay. And what has surprised you most on your journey from leaving university to where you are today?
in university, when you study concepts, you talk a lot about strategy, you talk a lot about direction. I think when you get your feet on the ground and start executing, you realize that there is so much of a delta that, and all that learning can only and only come when you're working with teams, when you're trying to execute different concepts. We were in a client presentation on Friday. We were building some demand forecasts and showcasing to customers as against what we designed 6 weeks back to what we were presenting yesterday. There was a lot of delta because realities start hitting you, data realities start hitting you, people realities also start hitting you, process realities start hitting you. And how do you tune yourself to adjust to those realities? Because your tool is only as good as the people who can use it and make good decisions out of it. So those are some of the learnings from university to execution that I've learned over time.
And we're on the Sustainable Supply Chain podcast. Under
Yeah,
sustainability is often looked at as a cost or a compliance issue. How do you see data and AI reframing it as a value driver, or do you?
absolutely do. Yes. Interestingly, in the last, say, 6 years or so that I've been leading supply chain practices and having conversations with various customers, you're absolutely right that when you think of design principles of supply chain, the way I like to express it to most customers also is supply chains traditionally have been designed for a cost min way of working, as in you always look to minimize cost
Mm.
with tolerable service levels. So whatever service you can achieve within that min cost is what you try to get to. And then the afterthought of a filter is, okay, let me see what's the sustainability score I got out of doing this. I've been trying to talk to customers about this almost triangle way of thinking about the supply chain, the three vertices being service, cost, and sustainability. As you keep tuning your supply chain, as you keep taking different actions, there's almost like an operating zone, right? You could pick a spot in this triangle, and every vertex implies a certain metric measure. Now, I've started getting into metric measures and the application of algorithms and AI and ML to actually help you orchestrate your supply chain in a certain way. What I mean by that is, let's say a particular transport from point A to point B
Mhm.
costs you $100, and it's going to give you a service of 90%, let's say. Another gives you $120, but it's going to give you a service of 96%. Your cost min will probably say, don't take the $120, take the $100 because it's $100, right? It's a
Yeah.
minimum cost. Whereas the second one, the alternate way of thinking of it would be that, hey, I'm going to get 6-7% additional service by doing $120. If the 7% justifies the additional $20, then why not do it? Right. But I think
Mhm.
third parameter here is in trying to cover that distance, are you also having an incremental lift in your carbon footprint, let's say, or in wastage measures, etc. Adding that as a parameter in this equation is where the influence of algorithms and AI can come into designing sustainable supply chains, is at least my belief.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense. But can you walk us through any real world examples of how AI has supported sustainability goals in supply chains?
Absolutely. I can think of about three different examples, and I'm mentioning these three because I would encourage anyone who's thinking of AI analytics and supply chain to again think of it in terms of a maturity curve.
Mhm.
At the absolute base of it, at the stage one, if you will, is the foundational elements of data in sustainability. So you have to build your baseline data foundation. Examples is a toy manufacturer has come to us and said, hey, I need to do a whole lot of compliance reporting around sustainability. I have all this data, largely supply chain data, but a whole lot of other financial data also spread across multiple systems. Can you help me connect with all that data, ingest it, engineer it, shape it so that it can facilitate my reporting? It can also facilitate some of the internal dashboards that I do. So this is sort of your foundational level of analytics.
Mhm.
You start taking it a step further, you can come into what we call causal and predictive analytics. So there's an organization who manufactures chemicals and functional forms. Their problem statement was, they said, hey, I run a factory. The consequence, natural consequence of running this factory is that there is a lot of wastewater that gets generated. It has to be released into water bodies. There are permissible limits. Anything above this, I have a fine attached to it.
Right.
Now, the initial problem statement was, can you tell me when I'm about to breach the permissible limit? We started having further conversations with them. What we realized we could solve for is, by the time you hit the permissible limit, it's already too late. It's already, you are in damage control by then.
Yeah.
But we could use the power of analytics AI to actually start detecting patterns, anomalies, and tell you when you're breaching your control limit. Meaning, you go beyond this, you have not yet hit the fine level,
Mhm.
but you are still in trouble. And if I can detect it enough, I can give you a signal back enough for you to then start adding control measures so that you don't exceed your pollution ever, but also you operate well within operating conditions. This is more of running predictions, predictive algorithms. A similar thing with a food waste for a food and beverage company, where we did a prediction of how much food is likely to get wasted or stale because of practices in the supply chain, and what can you do to arrest some of that. And the final level of maturity is sort of getting more cognitive with a lot of external data as well. There's an organization who came to us, an automotive company, and this is where it starts getting into scope 3, because what they said is, I have a lot of shipments that are flying around different parts of the world, and they are being flown around by a third party, a 3PL logistics provider. Is there a way for me to understand the traceability of every package of mine, so that I know that what's the total carbon footprint accumulation that is happening
Right.
because of the transit my packages are going through? And what can I do to work with them, to consult with them, to say, why don't you think of an alternate route, or why don't we think together about an alternate route? All of these are practical problem statements that have come our way, and we found different ways to try and solve them or find data solutions to them.
And what about the likes of digital twins? Can they be leveraged for sustainability? And do you see their potential? Has it been realized yet anywhere?
I think digital twins in itself are still fairly nascent in the industry. There's still a lot of proliferation to be done. But I think the power, and maybe for the audiences who may be hearing this term for the first time, a digital twin is meant to do two things, and two things very well. First, create a digital replica of any physical system. So it
Mhm.
can be a manufacturing line, a manufacturing plant, a warehouse, a distribution center, or it can also be a replica of your entire network. That is, all the connected parts of your network, from manufacturing to the truck that is transporting to warehouse, the truck transporting to DC, and so on. When you The first part is to create this twin so that you have visibility to everything. I'll also add one element to this: is a lot of digital twins in the market tend to construct what I like to think of as a conceptual twin, in that you have a concept in mind of how your supply chain is supposedly structured, and
Right.
then you almost create a simulation or a replica based on a conceptual diagram. The better way to do it is take actual data from your systems, learn the actual relationships between different sites, and then construct it. But the second part of a twin, which is important, is simulation. What
Yep.
if scenario planning? And that's where you really start getting to, say, for the inventory waste problem that I spoke about, damages and stales. If I stacked a pallet with 56 boxes versus 66 boxes in a pallet, how much is it going to make a dent on, or a reduction in my waste, is the kind of simulation problem you could solve for if you started constructing digital twins. They are more visual as well, so therefore they are more intuitive. The
Mhm.
forklift operator on the ground could actually maybe do a quick simulation. It's like the flight simulation type of a problem, where they could see that if I'm going in to lift pallets in a certain way versus a certain other way, am I causing less damage? Or if my forklift is traveling around my warehouse in different routes, is it consuming lesser fuel and therefore lesser carbon footprint? These are the kinds of things you could construct and simulate with a digital twin. That's the core application, if you will.
And you talk about data-driven sustainability as well, and that sounds great, but where do most companies fall short when they're turning data into actionable insights?
This is as true for sustainability as it is for other places in supply chain efficiency, visibility, as it were. But generally, when I've done mapping of that maturity that I spoke about earlier, or for organizations that are roughly about $2-3 billion and above in size, foundational data is usually a check.
Mhm.
Some level of dashboards for descriptive and diagnostic insights, usually a check. You could almost think of these as greens. You come to the next layer of maturity, causal insights. Okay, why did certain phenomena happen? If there was a delay in delivery, why did that delay happen? Or if for a particular lane my carbon footprint spiked, why did that happen? Are the kind of questions you want to answer. I'd say it's an amber kind of.
Mhm.
And then you start going into prediction and prescription, the next two levels. For a lot of organizations, it's kind of a cross, a red cross in both of this. That's how I imagine it visually. I don't mean to say that every part of an organization is a red cross.
Sure.
In some pockets of an organization, you would have experimented with different kinds of predictions, different kinds of cognitive insights.
Mhm.
If you had to take like an average of most organizations of that size, it's generally a struggle to have causal, predictive, prescriptive. As you start going to slightly smaller organizations, and when I say smaller, between 500 million to $1 billion, a billion to a couple of $1 billion, even the foundational level data and basic diagnostic insights for compliance reporting, that also starts becoming a bit of an amber. So, in that data driven sustainability and the maturity curve, this has been my learning of where organizations are. If someone were to ask me, where should I start?
Mhm.
I'd always say first principles is get your data foundations in place first. But having also said that, you can never almost approach this as let me try and shape up all the data in my organization first, and then I'll go to the next stage, because that perfect data doesn't exist in any organization. You do create as many pockets of data as you can consolidate to start solving for the next higher order problems, and then keep incrementally working on improving your data in your organization. Eventually you'll get to a shape where you'll feel like 70-80% of the data is okay. The remaining 20%, however hard you try, you're probably going to still have a struggle. The juice might not be worth the squeeze, so you probably ignore and you continue. But I think that's the way to think of problem solving with data driven sustainability.
What about things like on-shelf availability that you mentioned earlier and end-to-end connected planning? They sound great, but how do they translate into real-world wins for companies and consumers?
Oh, consumers as well. That's very interesting. I spoke about this concept of a connected supply chain. I
Mhm.
think everything is connected, and when you start solving for on-shelf availability, you essentially start solving for that consumer and a consumer-centric supply chain. In that, everything in your supply chain is moving and shaking to try and make sure that the right product reaches the right customer at the right time, place, quantity, quality, price. How do you now go about thinking through this on shelf availability? Is a lot of on shelf availability is thought of from the point of, oh, I need a distribution center that can somehow hustle to send product over to the retail store so that the
Mhm.
product is in front of the customer for them to pick up at the moment of truth. But I feel like the network has such a cascading effect. Just an example, about 6 months ago, I was talking to a customer. We were in a workshop in their office, and he said, I have this one warehouse that is backed out 4 days in the yard. So there are 4 days worth of trucks sitting in the yard. They
Wow.
just don't have the capacity or whatever to unload. And then the plant is keeping on sending more trucks their way. I mean, you think of it any which way, cost, service, or sustainability, This kills all three metrics.
Yeah.
There was nothing in the intelligence of the system to say that, you know what, I'm actually 4 days behind at that warehouse. Can we not reroute? Can we not go back to the end-to-end planning itself, which is sending the trucks, or B, the end-to-end visibility, which is looking at a truck going in, which can see 4 days of truck, can it not redirect to a nearby site if it has the capacity, or whichever site has the best capacity available? Fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of these decisions, even in large corporations, are largely heuristics, human led.
Mm.
Ultimately, a human has to make decisions without a doubt. But there has to be a machine that has to enable that human. And the idea of end to end planning plus on shelf availability is just these two problems that I described starting to work in a bit more synchronization, in that if there is an event in the network that is causing a spike in any of these three metrics, one, can there be a fix right now through alternate decisions? And two, can there be a feedback to the end-to-end planning to say, hey, there is this particular issue, it seems like it'll be a long tail to the issue, why don't we recalibrate our planning to think of it alternately? Both of these need a bit of a dynamism in the supply chain. We've been a little too static for a long time in the way
Mm.
our processes, systems, and people have operated, and that I think is a key need of the hour. The next time, well, I hope the next time of COVID doesn't happen in our lifetime or any of our future lifetimes. But any such red herring event happens, we talk about resilience. The resilience of a supply chain is not this big chest beating initiative or transformation. The resilience of supply chains are built in these small events and the ability to tackle these small events so that your deviations are never too far out. You're
Mm.
always staying stable and in control. I think that's my view of end-to-end planning plus on-shelf availability, operating towards sustainable supply chains, if you will.
To kind of achieve that level of resilience and agility, you obviously need to have AI built into your supply chain, but very few organizations seem to have achieved that. Why do you think that is? What kind of barriers are they facing trying to integrate AI into their supply chains, and how can they overcome them?
for for a lot of organizations, when I sort of start assessing where they are at in their maturity curve, I think some of the foundational elements of the data are things that they need to be painstakingly built. That's the part that's never going to be easy. Building AI algorithms is not as complicated if you have good data, but building good data is just painstaking. I think that's stage one. Stage two is, again, you have a bunch of systems. You sort of buy different systems and then figure out how to integrate them, how to get them in. That generally becomes one of the second stage gates, if you will. But I think the bigger mountains to climb are people, change management. It's one thing to build a box and say, here is an AI that's going to spit some results out, go follow what it does. But it's another to the human who's going to receive these numbers naturally. And it is something we speak about internally, have spoken in client presentations also, is why should a human want to trust a box that is spitting some numbers versus something that they have seen over time, believed over time, they believe they know better than a box does? Educating them around that the idea is, the box is not there to replace them, the box is there to augment their capability. Secondly, that box should also be able to take feedback from the human. If the human in the loop says, I think I have a better alternative to what you're suggesting, let me try what I am doing, the feedback to you is, no, I'm not going to do what you're going to do. Let the machine observe what the human is doing and learn from the fact that if the human took an action and it was a better outcome than what the box suggested, take that input back into your feedback loop. These are elements that are still maturing over time. I
Right.
think I mean, today, nowadays, no conversation is complete without mentioning generative AI. There is a certain power to generative AI in that it can take feedback from humans, it can generate elements that make the decision making journey for the human much simpler.
Mhm.
I think a mix of these solutions coming together is what will aid this maturity journey. I think we are some distance still away from that. I keep joking about this with a lot of my team members that I think there are so many good problems still to solve in supply chain. I could very well retire, and there'll still be a lot many more problems left to be solved. And that's sort of the learning journey that we are all on, right? That there's a lot of fun problems to solve, and we keep the endeavor on.
Okay, well, I mean, seeing as you brought it up, you were looking into the future. How do you see supply chains and analytics evolving in the next 5, 10 years, particularly in the context of AI and sustainability?
Hmm, hmm. There are, of course, a lot of organizations have set themselves goals for 2030, 2040. Uh,
Mm.
I think that in that journey to get there, data is going to be at the core of taking smarter decisions towards those goals. Almost want to say that organizations who want to achieve those goals, you can almost split them into data driven sustainability organizations and data agnostic or data absent sustainability organizations. I think the first category will probably get there faster, will probably get there much more efficiently, much more intelligently than the second lot who do things based on gut feel. I think that's one. I see that the journey there will split into two lines, and we might probably start seeing that more and more clearly. Again, within this, the qualifiers that most companies collect data. It now comes down to which of them use it well and which of them don't. There'll be that split. The proliferation of AI using smarter algorithms, using better decision engines will, I think, play a big role. I expect to see digital twins playing a role, especially in how you orchestrate responses from your supply chain, how you design interventions in your supply chain towards either better service or better cost or better service or a better sustainability, or maybe better still a balance of all three. In order to get to those realities, I think stronger data, stronger AI applications, and digital twins with simulation will come into play. Finally, I think the last element to this is taking your people along in this journey, helping them mature, helping them learn, grow, educating them more about making them data powered sustainability champions, if you will again go a long way in helping organizations accelerate that journey. That's my thought. Uh,
What metrics or KPIs do you think companies should focus on to measure the success of their sustainability initiatives and ensure continuous improvement?
hmm, hmm. I think naturally there are sustainability goals that have been set up, and generally these sustainability goals have fairly clear operational metrics around, say, example, food waste, cutting down the volume of food waste, measuring your carbon footprint and looking at optimizing carbon footprint, electricity usage, and so on. There are a
Mhm.
bunch of operational metrics that you anyway have a measure on. You can very naturally start measuring how much of an improvement are you making quarter on quarter, year on year, and so on for these operational metrics. I think what will also be interesting for organizations, and I'm hoping organizations are already doing this fairly well, is you have almost a project management plan from now up to milestones to your 2030 or to 2040 journey. And those have specific governance metrics, those have milestone achievement metrics versus did not achieve metrics. And it's not just the chief sustainability officer's job to track that. It's now going to be the job of the chief supply chain officer plus the chief sustainability officer plus the CFO as well, to track, are you even hitting your milestones? Somewhere along the line, I would like to see organizations start tracking one additional metric around people skill development. Your
Right.
learning and development skills in
Mm.
your people, are they getting certified? Are they doing practical projects? Let's say the number of practical projects that they're doing, Six Sigma projects or anything that is targeted towards sustainability, to sustainable development of your organization. These can be interesting governance metrics over and
Nice.
above your operational metrics to track how you're evolving as an organization more than anything else.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. And left field question: if you could have any person or character, alive or dead, real or fictional, as a spokesperson for supply chain sustainability, who would it be and why?
Ooh, wow. I'm also a football slash soccer fan. And just for the reach that two of these players have, I could almost think of a Ronaldo or a Messi. And given that a lot of these players already talk about, initiatives with UNICEF or David Beckham for that matter, UNICEF, etc. So somebody like that joining the bandwagon to be able to message it out, the message will reach so many millions. But if you wanted some character from history, I am very fascinated by Abraham Lincoln and
Okay.
the power of his oration, the pull
Mm.
he had. Somebody like that can also be very interesting as a spokesperson for driving sustainability across organizations. It can be quite interesting.
Nice. Nice. Great. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Sunder. Is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't covered that you think it's important for people to think about?
I think the last element of this, and I have a 5-year-old daughter, and when
Mm.
I think of very simple things like wake up in the morning, brush your teeth, don't keep the tap on while you're brushing your teeth. You could keep the tap off. Some simple things like that. We see if we can try our best to practice some of those things. I can't say that we are super successful. We try our best, but education at grassroots levels for, I mean, why should sustainability education start after you've finished your school, your college, your post graduation, and then you actually start? And at least that's been the reality for someone of my generation. Let's say that the
Right.
realization of sustainability has been in the last 10 years, maybe. That's when it
Hmm.
started to become mainstream as a conversation. But my daughter, who is now going to go into her first grade next year, shouldn't this conversation start in her classroom in the first grade itself? Why not? I think that is one thought that keeps coming to mind, that sh- should we start creating more responsible citizens by bringing some of these themes right at that grassroots level? Maybe that's the one immediate thought that
Yeah.
comes to
Nice. Nice. Great idea. Yep. Superb. Sunder, if people would like to know more about yourself or any
mind.
of the things we discussed on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
You could, of course, reach out on LinkedIn. You'd find me by the name Sunder, Sunder Balakrishnan. You can also visit the website of my organization, www.latentview.com, and you'll find a lot of information about what we do across different spaces. Don't feel shy to get in touch. More than happy to have great conversations.
Fantastic. Sunder, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate you giving me this opportunity.